Everybody fails. They say there are those that have failed and those that will fail. It's like every neighborhood has a jerk. And if you don't think yours has one, maybe you should look in the mirror. We're all going to fail. But there is some realities. If you're going to make mistakes, I would tell the up and comers, please make the small mistakes. Please make the small mistakes. I mean, in life, it's pretty interesting. As you get older, you become more bifurcated, if you will. Certain things bother you less, and other things bother you a whole lot more. And I'm at that stage in my career, in my life right now. But truth be told, not all apologies have to be accepted. Because I think if all apologies are accepted, everybody has free reign to do and say whatever they want to do because there's great erasure that makes it okay. But not all apologies have to be accepted. Not all failures are going to be survivable. So if you're going to fail, try to make it a small one. And the advice I give up and comers, if you're in the right organization, it's okay to be wrong. Don't be wrong too long.
There are opportunities for our work and careers everywhere, if you know where to look. That's easier said than done, especially in our fast-paced and constantly changing world. Ann Faremouth is talking to experts, employers, and job seekers to bring you insight and understanding about what's possible. This is Career Can Do, where we're navigating the new work world.
Welcome to the Career Can Do podcast, a top global podcast dedicated to helping you navigate the new work world. My name is Ann Faremouth, and I'll be your host for this episode. And today, I'm just delighted to have a guest on my show that I have the most admiration and respect for. Dr. Donald McNeeley has the unique perspective of both business CEO and adjunct academic professor. It's through this unique blend that he will address the impact of technological advancements in the manufacturing sector. He will draw specifically from his position and expertise in the domestic and international steel industry. Dr. McNeeley will address the industry's response to technological disruptions, both positive and negative. He'll share his research and thoughts on what he calls the paradox of productivity. His controversial thesis challenges the notions that ever-expanding productivity does infinite good. He explores potential social implications of increasing productivity and the impact on job creation. Further, he will address future challenges that will continue to disrupt for decades to come. He draws from the Chinese proverb, may you live in interesting times. And as a leader responsible for making a significant payroll, he in fact will punctuate that with, these are indeed interesting times. So after that long introduction, without further ado, help me welcome Dr. McNeeley. Doctor, say hello to everybody.
Well, hello, everybody, and thank you, Ann. Just a couple of quick comments. First, thanks for all you do for our industry. It's interesting to see your footprint grow throughout our industry and see you reference more and more. And also, congratulations, as I see our very own Ann Faremouth was featured in Forbes magazine. Your feature, Understanding the New Work World, is absolutely awesome. So that's pretty major league stuff you're doing there. So congratulations.
Oh, well, thank you. We talked a little bit in the Blue Room. I love what I do, and I love helping people. And, I get to meet great people like you with what I do. So it's all good. But, in our generation, there was a famous song by Bob Dylan, and it was called The Times They Are A-Changin'. And, I can't think of anything that describes these times better than that title of that song. What do you think?
Well, as you've written so articulately, when you talk about times are changing, that's transition. You and I have spoken in the past in the evolution of anyone's career, which lasts approximately 4 decades. You're going to encounter 3, no more than 4 points of inflection. And you need to be ready to navigate and lead in those points of inflection because that's where business bankruptcies occur. So you're right. These times, they are changing.
They are for sure. And I think it's great that you have that combination of both corporate and academia. But what mistakes do you see leaders commonly making during transitions?
Well, I like the question because it is the reciprocal of the way the question is normally framed. What are the attributes of successful leadership? And I think that's been significantly overdone and perhaps redundantly so. So, what mistakes do I see leaders who fail in the period of a transition? I think one is their frame of reference becomes dated. The more you're at the top and the more successful you are, either consciously or subconsciously, you start to paint yourself as invincible. You're immune to some of these things that are negatively affecting purportedly everybody other than you. So, one, I see a dated frame of reference. And then I think what happens is we become more and more biased. Now, by that, what I mean is you tend to reference and read only those things and those studies that affirm what you want to believe. So you really don't view or study or even consider an opinion other than your own. So you don't challenge your beliefs, and therefore, as they become dated, they become stronger and stronger within you. And the second mistake I see leaders make in a time of transition is they tend to think more tactically as opposed to strategically. The higher up you go, the more strategic you must be. And they tend to be too much here and now. All hands on deck. There's a transition here. There's COVID. What are we going to do? Well, somebody in that organization needs to think down the line. They need to think strategically. And I think leaders who fail tend to default to the here and now, to the tactical. And finally, in a transition, that means you need to be open to change. And think when some of your clients or yourself or myself go into a leadership position, we're all about change. And the reason we're easy to change and to consider change and effect change, we're changing something we inherited. We're changing somebody else's concept or strategy. And none of us want to move into a management position to simply maintain our predecessor's decision. So we're all about change, and it puts us on the map and it puts us in the magazines. But as time goes on, there's going to come a point where you need to reconsider your own ideas. And there's so many insecure managers out there, when it comes to challenging or rethinking their own ideas, they're somewhat reluctant to do so. And those are three attributes I see of leaders that fail in a time of transition.
I agree. And I think there's so much change right now that we're all, everybody is just struggling to know what the right thing is. And I think what it comes down to is balance. Dr. McNeeley, how do we balance the short-term decisions, things we have to handle right now, with the long-term vision? I think they're both very important, but I think sometimes we lose that balance. And how do you think we can do that to make it become effective?
I think we all need a North Star, and I think your long-term vision is your North Star. It's absolutely something that you're going to guide your short-term decisions. Even Proverbs 29:18 says, where there is no vision, the people will perish. Well, it's up to your leadership, your C-suite, your board of directors to create that vision. Once you anchor your North Star in that long-term vision of where do you want to be and when, what do you want to be and how, then I think when you make short-term decisions, you do that cause for pause and say, does this short-term decision move me closer to my long-term vision or does it not? And if it doesn't, abandon it, because bandwidth and time are so critical. You can't waste time on things that don't move you closer to your long-term decision. So I find that question or that answer relatively easy. If you've done a good job anchoring your North Star, how you distinguish that long-term vision from your short-term decisions is the short-term decisions must, in fact, need to move you closer to the long-term vision. And if not, abandon it or rethink it.
No, I agree. And I don't know if you remember, but I wrote a third book and my last chapter was all about the North Star, because I think as leaders, we have to have that. We have to have that mindset of that North Star. Where is that vision? Where do we ultimately want to go? And I think that the habits that separate those that strive from those that struggle is that they lack that North Star. They're dealing with too much of right now. Now, right now is important. Don't misunderstand me. But we have to have a goal. We have to have a vision. So I agree. And the other variable here that I think you and I will agree is going on is this AI. Okay. I think that AI is changing the way leaders make decisions. And what is your take on that? I mean, do you think there's some risks in relying too heavily on technology and leadership?
Let me respond to a comment you just made, then I'll pivot to the AI. Those that don't have that North Star and you caution us about the absence of one, you're absolutely right, because otherwise you just simply aggregate your short-term decisions and then you shoot the arrow on the wall and then you run up and draw the bullseye around it. And we're batting 1,000%, everything's a home run, everything's a bullseye. Where if you anchor in that North Star, as you say, then you can determine those short-term decisions. AI. AI is going to affect leadership in profound ways. And we study AI at the university. It's already infiltrated the university and subsequently business. But if I look at it from the 50,000-foot viewpoint, it's going to automate the routine. So simply stated, what it's going to do is automate the routine. In turn, I think it's going to free leadership bandwidth up for cultivating future leaders. And I think too many times we throw a person with potential into the deep end and let them learn trial by fire. And that's not really a very sophisticated way, but how do mentors find the bandwidth to develop the next iteration of leaders, the type of people that you're networking for in our industry? So I think as it automates the routine, it frees up bandwidth to do something even more important for the future. We spoke just a couple of minutes ago about the evolution of a business has these points of inflection, which are critical. And think for a minute, business concepts emerge for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. Just think of that in your own personal life. Don't people come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime? The same thing with business. So some things enter for a reason. Think COVID. Think COVID. Hopefully we're not dealing with that for decades down the line. Other things for a season. Tariffs. I don't know that tariffs will be front and center 10 years from now, but there's an example of a reason and a season. AI is a lifetime. AI is coming here for a lifetime. It is absolutely existential. It's not a fad. And I think leaders today that are incumbent C-suite, ignore it at your own peril. Ignore it at your own peril.
Yeah, I agree. I do believe that AI will help us become more efficient. It'll help us become maybe more organized and give us more time to have more goals and to look at those visions. One thing I think that my dad used to always tell me, Dr. McNeeley, don't be afraid to fail. Because I used to say, Dad, what if I do this and I don't succeed? He said, that's okay. You're going to learn something. All right. Don't be afraid to fail. So what is your take on that? I mean, how do you think failure shaped long-term success? I'm not saying go out, and don't plan. I'm not saying that. But what do you think?
Everybody fails. They say there are those that have failed and those that will fail. It's like every neighborhood has a jerk. And if you don't think yours has one, maybe you should look in the mirror. We're all going to fail. But there is some realities. If you're going to make mistakes, I would tell the up and comers, please make the small mistakes. Please make the small mistakes. I mean, in life, it's pretty interesting. As you get older, you become more bifurcated, if you will. Certain things bother you less and other things bother you a whole lot more. And I'm at that stage in my career, in my life right now. But truth be told, not all apologies have to be accepted, because I think if all apologies are accepted, everybody has free rein to do and say whatever they want to do, because there's great erasure that makes it okay. But not all apologies have to be accepted. Not all failures are going to be survivable. So if you're going to fail, try to make it a small one. And the advice I give up and comers, if you're in the right organization, it's okay to be wrong. Don't be wrong too long. And I think the way to avoid both of those things is find a way to attach to a mentor, because mentors will make or break you. Or I should say a mentor can make you. The absence of a mentor will break you. So when you try to look up in the organization for those that have come before you, none of them have time. Maybe in a backdoor way, AI is going to open up that bandwidth because they're going to automate the routine that frees up that bandwidth. What that AI is going to do in regards to your current question is it's going to take massive volumes of big data. All we've heard the last 5 years is big data. We're generating all this data, and a lot of it's irrelevant, or we don't have the ability to extract what in that data is actionable information. And I think that's what AI is going to do. There is some cons, though, but first, let me share what I perceive to be the pros. I think as leaders, we're going to make more informed, factual decisions based on the facts. It's right in front of you, as opposed to be driven by emotion. So I think when you can statistically or factually or with metrics justify a decision you make, I think it's of higher quality than emotional. Data centers are going to definitely affect our industry in that the construction of data centers is growing exponentially. Can't build data centers without our industry. Also, data centers, what a lot of people don't realize, Marianne, they're very much energy intensive. So now we're going to have growing demand for energy, which can't happen without our industry. By the way, 1 out of every 10 jobs in America is in the energy sector. The other thing they're going to do is automate jobs that nobody wants. We all have jobs open that nobody wants to do, and they're pretty much the routine road jobs. So this sounds like a panacea. Cons, I think some of the expectations of AI are unrealistic. I mean, they're going to find a cure for cancer. There's no longer going to be cystic fibrosis. We're not going to have diabetes anymore. We're going to have the magic pill. I think that's pretty high expectations. You're from Texas. And look at Arch Manning as a 17-year-old, win the opening game against Ohio State, win the national championship, go undefeated, and be the first freshman in a long time to win the Heisman Trophy. Talk about elevated expectations. And I think of that a little bit with AI. Some of the cons that I see, other than the elevated expectations, remember we said it removes bias from decision making. It said it promotes more diversity and inclusion. I think for a moment the risk is it's going to neutralize what you and I call intuition. I think intuition is invaluable, and the longer you're in your industry, you can rely on your intuition more and more. So I envision with some fear the situation where the metrics excludes you meeting someone who has that X factor, and that X factor that you only determine in person. And what will it do to unemployment? So as we automate more and more, we make it more efficient, there's less jobs out there. When you look at a Portland or an LA or a Chicago or Detroit or any of these cities being burnt to the ground, you'll find an almost perfect correlation between those cities experiencing that and high unemployment. People need jobs. They need a purpose in life. They need an income other than inheritance. And so as we rush to find the panacea of AI and its efficiency, could there potentially be an unintended social consequence? What's your thoughts? I mean, you're out there in the
No,
field.
I agree. I agree. I think you've hit on so many good points. And I think purpose is so important. One of my claim to fame, not to sound boastful, but what I'm really proud of is that my placements last a long time. I place people and they stay. And I think, I am very intuitive, but I also think I align that person with what jazzes them. What is their purpose? What do they feel good about? What do they want to do? When you align someone with a job like that, and not just about the money, or a lot of times, most of the time, they're going to stay because they like it. I also think, Dr. McNeeley, we talked earlier about balance. I think that AI might give us more time to have the balance, to have some time with our family. I'm an Italian, Catholic, family-oriented little girl, and family was everything. My grandmother lived next door, and I learned so much from her. So maybe AI is going to give us a little more free time to spend more time with family and have some of that work-life balance.
I think that ties in perfectly. Recently you wrote an article on the dragonfly and its ability to adapt to its environment. And I thought that was so spot on. If I could connect kind of some of your research and mine, not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are indeed readers. You must read, you must expand your knowledge base. So in an interview, I'll ask people, what's the last book you read? Whether it's industry related or not, are you at least investing in your mind? And then what articles or periodicals or podcasts do you listen to routinely? Because you've got to invest in yourself. And when you talk about that ability to adapt, what leaders are going to adapt to the emergence of AI and which are not, I think it's profoundly important. And you've got to look in that direction. My version of the dragonfly, as we all remember from high school biology, you drop the frog in the boiling water and it survives because it knows enough to jump out. Drop the frog in tepid water and turn the flame up. It will die before it realizes what's happening to it. It's too late. And so growing up as you did in the Catholic school, we learned Catholicism and nothing else. So as soon as we get out of that environment, if we have a thirst for knowledge, we study. And I studied Darwin and his theory of evolution, which you're never going to hear about in a Catholic or Christian school environment. And a lot of his research took place in the Galapagos Islands. But the takeaway is strong, survival of the fittest, if you recall. And it kind of ties in with your dragonfly because it wasn't the strongest of the species or subspecies that survived. It was those of the species that can most readily adapt to a changing environment. And I think that's the key for leadership. Take from your dragonfly, take from Darwin and his turtles and his monkeys, but apply it to AI's emerging and how are we going to adapt? The old adage of it's not what happens to you, it's how you react to how it happens to you. We're going to learn a lot about leaders in the next few years.
I think so. I think adaptability is our superpower. I think with things changing so much, we have to adapt. We have to be open to new ideas. And I feel like, we have to be open-minded. And I'm not saying get rid of all of our ideas and thoughts and beliefs, but be a little more open-minded to be able to adapt. So, Doctor, we're getting near the end here, and I want to ask you a final question. Your work as a clinical professor is well known outside of the industry, but what draws you to that academic environment, and how do you see it shaping the next generation of leaders?
So I think what is emerging is the controversy on college, and you've seen articles I've written that that's not the only key to success. You look at the work that Mike Rowe and many others are doing to promote the trades and our ability to sustain our country. I mean, think for a minute, the number one job of your government is to protect you. How do we protect our citizens without a military? How do you have a military without an arsenal? How do you have an arsenal if you can't manufacture your own weapons? So the trades are equally, if not more important in many situations. The controversy and the debate on college, is it worth it? The money is ridiculous. It absolutely is ridiculous. But if you have generous parents and grandparents that can fund 529s, I think if you can remove the justification of the return on the financial investment, I think it is time well spent. I'm in the graduate school, and I'll tell you about the graduate school. If you make a payroll, you walk on campus, you're a rock star. These students thirst for empirical experiences, practical data, and Marianne, I'll put you on the spot in this podcast and find a way to get to Chicago, or I'll bring you to Chicago. I'd love to put you in front of our class. I think.
I would love it. I would love it. I'm going to be teaching an online course to Walsh College on November 3rd, their MBA program. And I really love doing it. I just did a big job fair last week with Houston City College, and I was on a panel. But I would love it. I would love it. We're going to do that for sure.
That's an efficient way to do it. But I want you in the classroom where you could feel the temperature and the vibe. And the appeal to me and how it helps is our society has become so political correct. Let me tell you how a classroom and an academic environment is helping us build better leaders for the future. If I have a supposition or something I want to do, what I know is I need to study it, because when you challenge me, I had better been prepared. Better be prepared. In that situation, we're reluctant to challenge people anymore. People now have been conditioned that they're not going to be challenged, so they start to confuse their opinion for intellect. And that academic environment is really one of the last places where we can disagree without being disagreeable. We can raise questions that in general society we can't. We can challenge and probe and challenge and probe. And I think people come out the other end prepared to be better leaders, if that makes sense. So that's the appeal to me.
I agree. Well, we're getting near the end, and you've given our listeners so much good advice. And it's always, such a pleasure, Dr. McNeeley, to have you on the show. And I can't thank you enough for all you do for both our industry as well as the academic environment. And you're so bright, you're so brilliant, but yet you have this way about you that is so real and down to earth. And it's just a pleasure. So anyway, I really appreciate you being on the show, and we'll keep having you on because we get so much good response. And all the best to you there in Chicago. I hope you don't have a real bad winter, but I sure will come up there. I have a sister that lives there in Evanston, and I would love to come up there and visit with you. So thank you so much, and we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Marianne.
We thank you for tuning in to our Career Can Do podcast. We make no guarantees on results for your particular quest, but we hope you enjoy the information presented. The views and opinions expressed in this program are solely that of the guest or speaker and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of Ann Faremouth and Faremouth & Company. Thank you.